Hello, and welcome back to This Is Your Mind, Applied Neuroscience for Well-Being. I am your host, Anne-Marie Rossi. Did you know that your biggest immune system organ is your gut? Or that there are 100 million neurons in your intestines? Or that 95% of serotonin and 50% of dopamine are produced in your gastrointestinal tract? Scientists literally refer to your gut as your second brain. This week, we will learn about the intimate connection between the enteric and central nervous systems called the gut-brain axis, and the neuropsychological and physical diseases associated with its dysfunction. We will spend some time focusing on the vagus nerve and its role in regulating the parasympathetic nervous system, as well as introduce exercises to activate it. And lastly, we will end with a discussion centered around the gut microbiome and mindful eating. This field of research is exploding, with more than 5,000 studies published just in the last 5 years. But the concept is not new. Hippocrates, known as the father of medicine, wrote, "All disease begins in the gut." Now, we don't know that to be true for all disease, but what we have recently uncovered is that many diseases we previously thought had nothing to do with the gut, in fact, absolutely do, including Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, ALS, and frontotemporal dementia, multiple sclerosis, many cancers, cardiovascular disease, autism spectrum disorder, depression, anxiety, PTSD, schizophrenia, and more. The enteric nervous system is the largest component of the autonomic nervous system. It consists of 2 networks of neurons and extends from the esophagus all the way to the anus. There are more than 500 million neurons in the enteric nervous system. That is 5 times the number in the brain, and it produces more than 30 neurotransmitters. Additionally, it releases hormones and peptides into the bloodstream, which are able to cross the blood-brain barrier. It is responsible for secretion, the movement of material from one point to another, motility, the contractions of the muscles in your gastrointestinal system to move food, mucosal maintenance, the innermost layer of the GI tract and the location of the microbiome, immunological defense, and so much more. The gut and the brain are in constant communication with each other through endocrine, immune, and neural pathways. This communication is a two-way street with information moving in both directions. For example, when the brain is under stress, it activates the hypothalamus-pituitary-adrenal axis, triggering the release of cortisol. Cortisol affects the immune cells, alters gut function and permeability, and changes the composition of the gut microbiota. The gut microbiota can alter levels of cytokines, which are proteins involved in sending messages between cells in the immune system, and regulates the inflammatory response. This has very obvious and immediate effects on the function of the brain. One of the main mechanisms for communication between the gut and the brain is via the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is actually 2 nerves extending from the medulla oblongata in the brainstem to the abdomen. It is the longest cranial nerve in the body and is often referred to as the wanderer nerve because of how many organs it touches and how much of the body it is in contact with, bringing information of the inner organs, such as gut, liver, heart, and lungs, to the brain. The vagus nerve plays an incredibly important role in a number of bodily functions. It regulates digestion, heart rate, respiratory rate, and vasomotor activity, the constriction of your blood vessels and blood pressure, as well as certain reflex actions like coughing, sneezing, swallowing, and vomiting. It is the main modulator of the parasympathetic nervous system. You may remember back in week 2, we discussed this system in greater detail. The parasympathetic nervous system is responsible for rest, relaxation, digestion, conserving energy, and allowing our body to recover from stress. By activating the vagus nerve, we can activate this system, enabling us to quite literally turn off the sympathetic nervous system's stress response. Vagus nerve stimulation has been shown to be an effective treatment for a variety of diseases, including cardiovascular disease, epilepsy, and depression, as well as anxiety, PTSD, inflammatory bowel disease, arthritis, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, chronic pain, fibromyalgia, migraines, and more. In addition, vagus nerve stimulation has been shown to increase neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to make new brain cells and new neural pathways. There are many exercises that you can do to improve the strength and function of your vagus nerve. You may have heard this called vagal tone. This week, we will introduce you to a few of these exercises in the audio-guided section, including diaphragmatic breathing, extended exhalation, yoga, and chanting. There will also be a PDF document with a dozen other natural ways to stimulate your vagus nerve, including my favorite, getting cold. For a long time, it was thought that what happened in the gut stayed in the gut, and that most information was traveling from the brain down the vagus nerve. But we now understand that 90% of this communication is actually from the gut up into the brain. A major player in this communication is the gut microbiome. The microbiome is a vast array of microorganisms living inside the human body. And when I say vast, I mean it. There are estimated to be more than 500 species, totaling approximately 100 trillion microorganisms. On average, the human body has 10 times the amount of bacteria as they do human cells. And these microscopic organisms are essential to our health and well-being. They do everything from break down our food so that we can process it and extract the nutrients we need, make vitamins we don't have the ability to make ourselves, train our immune system to recognize danger, and produce anti-inflammatory compounds that fight off disease. They also produce many neurotransmitters, including dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin, and GABA. There is so much interest in the microbiome that the National Institute of Health created the Human Microbiome Project in 2007, involving over 30,000 participants. Hundreds of studies have demonstrated associations between the health or dysfunction of the microbiome and disease. When the gut microbiome is sick, we are sick. It directly impacts our immune system and our nervous system, influencing our mood, our behavior, and the overall health and function of our brain. The microbiome changes throughout our life and is deeply influenced by antibiotics, diet, exercise, hygiene, stress, and more. In fact, early childhood stress and chronic adult stress significantly affects the gut microbiota composition, as well as the intestinal barrier, making it leaky with large cracks or holes, allowing for partially digested food, toxins, and bugs to leak into our bodies. As you can imagine, that is not good for you and can affect many aspects of your health. There are a number of things you can do to improve the health of your microbiome, including prebiotics, probiotics, stress management, diet, and more. There is significant clinical evidence to support probiotic intervention in reducing anxiety and depression, chronic pain, decreasing stress responses, and improving mood, as well as improving gastrointestinal and allergic diseases, obesity, type 2 diabetes, certain cancers, and more. Probiotics have also been shown to increase the body's immunity and fight off bacterial infections, as well as improve vaccine efficacy. They have demonstrated that probiotics could reduce the severity of COVID-19 morbidity and mortality, but more research is still needed in this area. Probiotics should be used with caution, especially in critically ill patients, and they are not recommended in immunocompromised patients or those with prosthetic valves. Prebiotics, as defined by Mayo Clinic, are non-digestible substances that act as food for the gut microbiota, and most of those identified being carbohydrates. Now, balance is key, and eating too many prebiotics may lead to gas and diarrhea, which does not happen with too much consumption of probiotics. However, when used at correct doses, they do not have any adverse effects. There are two ways to get more pre- and probiotics into your gut: fermented foods and dietary supplements. Obtaining these through foods should be your first choice, whereas supplements should be reserved to treat specific issues prescribed by your doctor and are not recommended for everyday use. We have included for you a PDF from Mayo Clinic with their suggested foods for both prebiotics and probiotics. What all of this information should make clear to you is that your diet is vital to the health of your entire body, including your brain and central nervous system. This leads us into the last segment of our class today, mindful eating. In the previous weeks, we have discussed what it means to be mindful, aware, without judgment, and willing to take action. When we eat mindfully, this means we are bringing this mindset into how we shop, prepare, serve, and consume our food. There is significant evidence that mindful eating is an effective strategy to address binge eating and emotional eating. Additionally, systematic reviews and meta-analysis show that mindful eating is as effective as calorie-restrictive diets for weight loss and more sustainable. The first step in mindful eating starts before you've actually eaten. Begin with setting aside time to plan your meals for the week, writing on a shopping list and considering the health value of every item. I have found that ordering my food for pickup via a supermarket app is incredibly helpful in this process, as it means avoiding the impulse purchases, which usually are processed foods like chips and candy. The second step is to stop skipping meals. The result of this is that when you do eat, you are so hungry that you often make poor decisions and shovel food into your mouth at breakneck speed. This is critical because eating slowly is a major piece of mindful eating. Did you know that it takes your stomach 20 minutes from the time you start eating to tell your brain you are full? When we slow down and consume our food mindfully, research shows that we actually eat 25% fewer calories. The third step is to start with asking yourself, am I hungry? Like really hungry? Or am I bored? Am I stressed, sad, or lonely? For many people, food has been a comfort and a distraction, mindlessly shoveling treats down our throat as we chase a dopamine hit to calm our minds and self-medicate our fears and struggles away. If it turns out that you aren't actually hungry, engage in one of the many techniques you have learned over the past few weeks to surf the storm. Breathe, go for a walk, engage in an art or a favorite hobby. Or, if you are really ready to uncover some hard truths, sit with the uncomfortableness of these feelings in meditation and look to uncover what is driving them. Truth be told, the weed only stops growing when you pull it out by the root. If you have decided that yes, you are in fact hungry, move on to step 4, small portions. When our plate is full, we can trick ourselves into thinking we need to eat everything. Particularly if you grew up in a family like mine, where you weren't allowed to get up from the table until your plate was empty. Your plate should be approximately 45% vegetables, 25% whole grains, 25% healthy lean protein, and 15% fruit. If after you've eaten your small plate, you're still hungry, return to this same division. Meaning, don't fill up on more grains and fill up on more veggies instead. Now that you've gotten your small plate prepared, we can move on to step 5. Take a moment to appreciate your food. All of the effort it took from many people around the world for you to have the opportunity to have these items on your plate. Most of us aren't growing all or any of the food we are consuming. It's important to remember the back-breaking labor of farmers, processors, and more, and express your gratitude. Next week, we will talk more about how gratitude quite literally rewires your brain. But for now, just simply take a moment to be mindful of all that it truly takes for this food to appear on your plate. Step 6 can often be the hardest for people, the actual consuming. Bringing your full and undivided attention to the act of eating your food. Try and remove any distractions like the television or your phone and focus solely on the act of eating. Bringing all of your senses to this meal. Be attentive to the colors, aroma, texture, and tastes. Take small bites and put your utensils down between bites. Chew thoroughly. And I mean thoroughly. 15 to 40 times per bite. Take this time to be truly present with your food. This week, we covered a ton of material, beginning with an introduction to the enteric nervous system and the gut-brain axis. We discussed the role of the vagus nerve and introduced some natural ways to trigger and improve its function. We learned about the microbiome and its integral role in the health of our mind and body. And lastly, we shared with you some proven techniques to engage in mindful eating. Throughout this next week, I'd like you to focus on both the vagus nerve exercises and mindful eating. Engage in the audio-guided practices for vagus nerve stimulation a minimum of 4 times this week. Additionally, try to have at least one mindful meal per day, taking note of your experience. You may find that foods you thought you loved, you don't actually love, and foods you've avoided, like spinach, may become a new favorite. Remember that you are quite literally feeding your microbiome, and if they aren't healthy and happy, you won't be healthy and happy.